My name is John Kara. I am the Director of On-Ice Programming Development here at the RINK.
My name is Matthew Asmundsson. I'm the Manager of Sports Science and Performance at Testify Performance within the RINK Training Center.
Yeah, with R1 this year, on ice, we really tried to take a focus on a lot of the feedback we had from last year. Whether it was our group sizes, whether it was the amount of time players had on ice, goalies and players. We really tried to focus in on taking it one step further, always trying to improve it. So looking at our groups going even smaller, position-specific groups getting smaller in themselves, having just D on the ice. And then also adding in the combo of having D and forward. So the ability to work at your position-specific skills, but then be able to do them in a tactical setting against forwards, for example, for the defense, is a big step in the program this year. I think the other side of it is taking feedback on our scrimmages and really taking a step forward with those, turning those into small area games. But it's looking at the program as a whole and what elements of it did we want to provide players at each age group. So really taking that and then building that into the on-ice, but looking first at the focus for both on-ice and off-ice, what you would want to have in the ultimate program, whether you're U15, U15.
Yeah, well, and I think
U13.
one of the biggest things with a little bit smaller groups, a little bit more positional focus, the biggest thing through my lens is people play enough hockey nowadays. We're playing enough hockey at times and at certain age groups, as we all know, at times too much, right? So during this off-season period, it's having those smaller groups, being in smaller spaces is really good with regards to, tissues in the hips and maybe just ramping up our intensity a little bit more systematically over time rather than kind of just jumping right into the deep end. Yeah. It's a very nice phased approach. So through my lens, where I'm really looking at things, health, fitness, preparedness of tissues, it makes a lot of logical sense.
And I think the side of it too, when you look at R1, is that you want to provide that athlete-centered approach. So what does that athlete need at that age? Not only that age, say U13, but at U13, what does a 2014 need as opposed to a 2013?
Yeah, scaling that.
They're a major versus a minor. How are they preparing? What are they getting ready for? Maybe that major player has had a year of development, being in the gym, being on the ice, whereas that 2014 is now going to have that more introductory phase to the gym, getting used to it, having that addition of training and on ice. And then you fast forward that all the way up to your juniors and pros. And as a junior, as opposed to a pro, their whole layout is completely different as well. We're looking years in advance from a 16-year-old to a 19-year-old. Yeah. How do they prepare? Has their rest been built in? What are they going to see in the next couple of years? I think it's all part of that every year when we look at R1, that's really how we evolve it, is what the players need.
Well, and you and I talk about it every year. Like, we've seen every player at every point in these various journeys in hockey. And, there's the landscapes changing with different pathways, and those timelines are probably going to change a little bit. So that'll be new. But up until this point, we kind of have a very clear understanding as to like the next year, what they're going to face, the physical, attributes that are going to be at a higher level than maybe what they're used to. Yeah. And then working backward from that goal of starting to play in September, October, working backward from that goal and establishing the plan that needs to be put in place to help them succeed when they have to step into that new level.
And even with that landscape shifting, even just having the awareness piece of that, for example, a guy might be heading to college as a 19-year-old and only be here for June and July. Yeah. So his timeline now shifts from the typical 19-year-old and junior. Their timeline now shifts and their whole training will shift towards the college.
And I think having the resources at our disposal where somebody like myself has the time to connect with that strength coach at that school that he or she is going to, or yourself connecting with the coaching staff on the tactical and skill side of things, to make sure that we're setting them up so that when they roll into that early entry or whatever it may be, they're in the best possible position to maximize their long-term development, not just their development for that year, long-term. These people are all still young and they have a lot of runway ahead of them. Upstairs, I would say we do an amazing job of blending. We have a saying, science matters, but it doesn't. So it's blending the science and the art, right? So we have the technology, we have the database with regards to testing scores and where players should be at different points in their journey. And that's fun and that's great. And that really gets the nerd in me and our staff going. And having those metrics to fall back on to understand if the interventions and programming that we're putting in place is actually helping them as a hockey player is fun. But I think on the other side of it, the energy in the community in the summer within Testify cannot be matched. The amount of bodies that are coming through, it's organized chaos for sure. But the energy paired with the systematic individualized programming, that's a hard thing to match anywhere else, I think. On the summer off season and off ice training side of things, it's an opportunity to fill buckets that haven't been touched or filled all season, right? So depending what level you're at, it's going to be done better or worse. But even at the minor level, you're getting in maybe 10 dry land, sessions where maybe they're doing circuit training or things like that, versus you come in here and we're going to do a full diagnosis and kind of tell you, obviously take that 14-year-old player's goals and considerations into mind, but also with our profiling system, be able to tell you hey, this is where you're lagging. This is what a weakness is for you. And we're going to work on these weaknesses at this point in your developmental journey. And those initial, weeks in the off-ice side of things, they see a ton of return on their investment. And that is just so exciting to me because players feel it. They feel it on the ice. And no matter what our data is saying and our testing is saying, as long as the player is feeling it, I'm happy. I'm over the moon. So those moments, I'm excited to reignite those come May and June.
I think it's a culture too. A little bit from the top down.
Yep.
I think when you look at the group of professional athletes we have that come in that are now consistently coming in, it just kind of breeds itself down into all the groups. So I think that cultural piece is a big description of the summer. And then I think, I believe the excitement side of it, I think, players are excited to be back. Coaches are excited to implement the programs that we've been working on months in advance, specific to players, and really roll it out and see how it goes. So if I was to describe the start of the summer, I think that's a big piece, is just the culture among everything. And this year we're really taking a step with that too, again, advancing the program with that opening week of R1. So after Canada Day, having just R1 own our facility the first week, I think it's going to be a really exciting time, and I think it's really going to establish that culture further. Just having a week like that with sessions on all three of our sheets going, goalies on the goalie sheet, players on the training sheet, small area games, scrimmages 3-on-3, position-specific work, plus the gym, coming up and getting the gym and really setting that foundation for, our summer and what we want to build. So so the whole concept of the R1 program, we had athletes that were training with us that were starting to get to a certain level that they were looking and being advised to go to Toronto to skate. At that time, Gary Roberts was, ran the program, and that was kind of the big name in the industry that incorporated a real strong focus in off-ice. And players went there and they had results. They had great groups. They had, whether it was you needed to gain weight, whatever it was. And for us, we wanted players to continue to train with us. We didn't want them to have to leave home. Their off seasons were short enough. And when we started to look into, myself and Mike Hellier started to look at, what we could provide here so that players didn't have to leave. So the concept of the RINK was the naming of the RINK 1 program. So it was one program that you could choose whatever age you were and it would provide you access to the best people from our company. You'd have access to the professionals in every area. You'd have the best player to coach ratio on the ice. You'd be grouped with the strongest groups that we had, and really provide a player an experience that they didn't need anything else. They would get the results from that program. In advance of that, to develop that type of program, we had to look at each age group, minor, major, 16-year-old and junior, 17-year-old and junior, getting drafted, 18-year-old, 19, where the highest player would go, but then the player below that, and really lay out what does their season look like. So, do they have U18 camp in the summer? Do they have U17 camp in the summer? Do they start with U16s for Team Manitoba? Where is that top athlete going to go? And then mapping out not only their training, but also their rest periods. And I think that was really the connection of the R1 program, was that when we were talking with parents or players, we could tell them not only what that off season they could expect out of that off season, but what the following years they should be doing or expecting to see. And 3 years in advance, we would prep that athlete for that. So it started with that first group of athletes that we took through, and basically the branding of the name was the RINK 1 program. This is the one program that you got to do that's going to get you ready. And it's not only looking at this year, but it's preparing you for the years in advance. You want results, we're going to get those results for you every year, but it starts by taking that step back. And then that experience and that culture just started to breed and started to grow. And one of the limitations we always had, in certain cases, a strength was our facility, but the limitation was we used to run a lot out of facility at a different location, so where we had access to full sheet. And then when we moved here in 2019, it brought everything together. We had the facility, we had the gym, we had the on ice, we had the training sheet, we had the goalie sheet, we had every aspect that we could provide the player. And now it just brought it to even a further level where it was one location. You literally came to one spot and you got everything. And it was coordination between professionals in all areas, building that program for you, not going to skate somewhere else and then come here for off ice or vice versa. One of the issues we had early on was we had guys training elsewhere. And let's say we're in a speed phase of the summer. So first weeks of the summer, it's all about speed. And they're coming in and they're absolutely bagged. They couldn't even move, and we're trying to build speed. So it was that coordination. That was the next step, was the ability to get the gym dialed in with it. And really, it was the ultimate vision when we came here in 2019 for what R1 or RINK 1 really could be. So
on the experience side of things with the R1 off-season program, I think number one that kind of pre-qualifies us for all of this is kind of just going back to the point that we've seen players at every stage. We've zoomed out and been a part of that long-term progression over time. So that's an extremely important facet. Going back to how it started on the off-ice side of things, essentially I saw a hole, had players, like John mentioned, skating in all these different places. And then we were able to kind of, through the hockey world, connect and do the simple things, such as making sure players weren't fried for on-ice work, and really prioritizing that on-ice work and doing things on the off-ice side of things that would either complement it or just integrating schedules. A lot of it just comes down to that. So that was a great first step. And then, coming to the facility just made everything that much easier, because that planning process now isn't on ice over here and off ice over here. It's in the same blender. So all those ingredients are coming together to make the perfect smoothie, right? So, integration, I think we've gone back and forth on what those models should look like, right? I think initially when I got here, it was maybe trying to replicate aspects of hockey in the gym. And that took some education from me on maybe why we don't want to do that in situations where that may be useful, right? Or at different stages in their development where we might want to really get down that specific rabbit hole, and why that might not be useful earlier in their development where we're trying to build that well-rounded, holistic, healthy athlete. You know, on the off-ice side, as it relates to experience, I think experience is twofold. Experience in the sense that we have 4 people in the gym that are going to be masters of science and have completed thesis projects at a high level and published original research. So that's awesome, and we have that academic background to understand science, the scientific process, and how to implement those interventions over time. And then but you also have to have an understanding of how the actual world of the sport works, right? So knowing that at certain points in the summer, no matter what my science says, players are going to want to do certain things, and they need to do that to feel confident. So you need to have an understanding of that, more the psychological side of their development. So being able to kind of work with players, work with coaches, and, you know, make that whole triangle work at a really high level while still thinking long-term in mind. I'm always on the off-ice side. We always revert to the long-term, and we try to really zoom that lens out to make sure players have success for as long as possible.
I think the other piece for integration is the value of each area that we put on each other. Mm-hmm. A lot of other programs, maybe the on-ice is the high point of it, but the off-ice is lacking. Or the off-ice is the high point of it, and then your practices are just practices. 3-on-3,
scrimmages,
flow skates. Yeah. So I think a big part of the integration was the bringing value to each other of what each side does. And also having an understanding and that communication of what each side is doing and what each side's goals are, and creating that into one common vision. 100%. Because so much of it is fractured from, you know, whether the off-ice coach has a vision of, you know, he wants his athlete to be a certain way, and the on-ice coach has a vision of what they want an athlete, or they're just looking at running practices. I think that that's really what separated the program, was like-minded people coming together on both sides that they're professionals in, and creating that one model for an athlete together that way.
And I think, like, even too, making the integration pie a little bit larger, like, you know, if we're at this level, communication with Western League clubs, Junior A clubs, professional clubs, and bringing that information in the fold and being able to speak that language, where we may have an idea and we might be a little bit off because the organization's saying, hey, we want this one thing done with this player. Like, this is the outcome measure that we need improved by August 31, get it done. And that's where we have the time and the relationships, I think, to get that information from people and build that into the plan, right? And really help that player with, like, hey, you know, this is what the organization wants. We're going to put the plan in place to get you there, and really giving them that specific integrated approach to how we're going to accomplish that, both off the ice and on the ice, with the ultimate aim of performing come October.
Like, the term athlete-centered for me means that it's a program developed specifically around your needs, based on timing of year, based on timing in your own development. And again, coming back to the valuing of each area, the off-ice and the on-ice, is again a lot of what's out there is a huge value in the off-ice. And they've done a ton of research on the off-ice side, and they've prepared, and they've got their athlete-centered program. But does that complement the on-ice and what that athlete needs at that time? You know, does the athlete need to be skating throughout the month of July? Well, what do? We put our heads together and say, no, the athlete doesn't need to be skating throughout the month of July. The optimal program for that athlete is to start by this date. Maybe it's the 3rd week of July. And not start on the ice, but start off the ice. And why do we do that? Because it's the best thing for the athlete, and it's athlete-centered. So they start off the ice. Why do they do it? Well, to get their bodies ready. So they jump on the ice, and now they're ready to do what they need to do on the ice. Why does our on-ice progress? Why do we start with core 4? Why do we start and then progress to position specific? Why do we finish with high tempo prep before training camp? because it's all athlete-centered. And that athlete that starts with you at the start of July, their timeline might take them till the middle of August, where that other athlete that starts with you at the end of July, their timeline takes them to the second week of September. So you're really optimizing and you're looking at that athlete on their own, not as a group. What does that athlete need? What does that 2011, 2012 athlete need that's different than the 2011? Because there are intricacies that we know that they're going to go through. You touched on the mental side of it too. For some of those athletes, they're heading into a bantam draft year. Well, we have to prepare them differently for that year, right? So to me, that's what athlete-centered is that value that we put into the planning of both the on and the off ice for each birth year and athlete based on where they're at and the sport that they're in, which is obviously hockey we're talking about. But that to me is athlete-centered when I look at it.
Yeah, on the off-ice side, to me, athlete-centered, it's a little bit different than on the on-ice side, because in the gym, at the end of the day, athlete-centered is as clear-cut as it can be, where our athletes are doing individualized programs suited to them. So, athletes, we all don't move the same. We all don't have the same speed characteristics. We don't weigh the same. So you're going to need, right, some of those basic markers of fitness and performance are, the gap you're going to see within a 2011 age group is going to be massive, right? So where they're at with their, growth, maturation, and pubertal development, that's going to be a huge factor in how we implement different types of program design and different types of focuses that we're really going to drive through that training program. On the off-ice side, being so individual in nature, obviously you don't need other players to train. Whereas if you want to get better at hockey, you're going to need to be doing it with other people at some point, flowing, communicating, timing, so on and so forth. Training's training, right? You can work with a dumbbell by yourself, obviously everything being coach-led, but we do have an advantage, I would say, in the sense with the off-ice training where we can truly run that individualized program day by day just because of the nature of how it works. And then for me, the athlete-centered side of it, a big part is relationships. So we've had clients, retention's probably our strongest characteristic on the off-ice side of things. So, we've had clients had guys, I think I'm into double digits now, 10 years. So at every stage in their career. So those relationships with not just myself, the entire staff and the community, and the fact that players want to come every single day, I think is the true definition of being athlete-centered. Because there's days you really don't want to go to that gym because it's going to be hard and it's going to be miserable. But the fact that we have created enough morale, community, and culture that we can get over that hump and players still show up, we don't track attendance. We never have, and honestly, we never will because we don't have to. And to me, that's the ultimate sign of an athlete-centered program.
Mm-hmm. And I think the other piece, thinking of it a little bit more with the athlete-centered side of it, is a big thing we establish is habits and details. So whether it's on the ice, whether it's off the ice, it's preparing players with those little things that they need to get better at. So if you're a U13 player and you're a 2013 this year, what do you need for next year as a major that's going to help you to get better? As a defenseman, even taking it further, or a goaltender, or a forward. Yeah. What do you need at that level to get better? And we're in the game so much, and we have so much experience with players over the years, like we said, through the pathway that a lot of them have taken with us. That's really, again, what I think separates us from others, is we're not just looking at the hottest trend that comes out of the Four Nations this week. Yeah. Somebody scores a goal that's the hottest trend. It's like, what are you seeing that you're going to see 20 times in a game? So as a defenseman, what's something that you're going to do 20 times in a game? You're going to have to turn and go back and get a puck and make a play. So you should be doing that every day. That's a habit, and that's a detail in the game. We teach the detail within it. Do you go back? Do you shoulder check? Do you get the puck? Do you have deception when you do it? Do you have awareness when you do it? Those little habits and details, they're not the things you're going to see on the highlights all the time, but it's the thing you're going to see if you watch that clip a full minute back from when the goal is scored. You're going to see things happen at the start of that clip. Those are the skills that we're going to teach along the way to build to get you to that highlight. But the highlight thing gets you to that. That's your instincts kicking in when you watch a guy. But it's those habits that started at the start. Did the guy chip the puck? Did he protect it? Did he make a pass, take it on his backhand, make a play? It's those things that nobody notices, that those are the things we're doing every day with our athletes. And it's really what separates them.
Well, and on the off-ice side, just simply our staff knowing what those key focuses are at those different age groups is massive, because you can have a conversation about it, right? So staff can show that understanding of like, hey, I saw you were working on, pivoting and going to pick up on a retrieval, and it's starting to look smoother. How does it feel for you? Oh yeah, coach, it feels great. Okay, well, maybe the athletes start to make the connection between some of the hip dissociation work that we do in the gym, or even just, maybe start to understand why we make them warm up for 15 to 20 minutes and do joint by joint mobility pieces, because, spinning your neck is actually a really important task in hockey, and rotating through the upper back and then having a wide range of gaze. Again, little tiny things that you're not going to see on Instagram. You're not, that stuff doesn't sell. But us pounding it every single day and forcing people to do some of that boring work, it's what it takes to succeed, and we've seen that over and over.
Yeah, and it's that analogy that really, I think, separates R1, is that it's, so much of what you see, so you see the highlight on TV, you see the big play, but you don't realize the countless hours, the countless reps, the little things that athlete did to get to. You can watch the highlights in the morning and see 15 different things that happened, but you don't realize the amount of time that athlete put in advance, and the amount of people that, put time into that athlete as well. And I think that really is what separates that athlete-centered approach, is that there's countless hours put into the planning of it. There's countless hours put into what that athlete needs. And then the investment in the athlete as well, right? So I think that's really, when you look at athlete-centered, that's probably the biggest thing that separates when we talk athlete-centered for us. We're envisioning the whole piece that gets you to that one moment. So, well, to be honest with you, I think this year compared to last year is further ahead, and I'd say the year before that was further ahead than that year. I think if we look at next year and we look at where it's going to be further ahead. Why? Because again, it's athlete-centered, and we're constantly challenging ourselves to find ways to evolve the program. Conversations are going to lead us to new ways to approach things on the ice, or off the ice. But I feel that has always been something for R1, is that as a player comes in, they can't predict exactly what the summer is going to be. Why? Because it's evolved. Because the game changes. Every day the game changes. And there's new training methods, there's new things to do on the ice, and it's not finding the hottest trend and doing it. It's talking about those habits and details of what that player does. And it's still foundationally, the game is the game. It's been the same way for years, but it's been pushed by those innovations in off ice. Players have gotten faster. Okay, so how can we get our players faster the next year? We might find a new way to do that integrates both on and off ice. But that's really, to me, when we talk about integration and year to year, has it morphed into what we've wanted? Right now, it's where we want it, and we're super confident with it. But we'll probably look back in 5 years and be like, oh man, or we'll look back and say some of the things we did in summer 2025, some of the things we did there were great, and we're going to use them again in 5 years. But to me, that's what separates the program, is guys come in and it's like, it's moving forward. Every year it's moving forward in some capacity, giving them, something that's going to improve those habits and details for them.
For me, I just think, we have to be, if we're going to be pushing others to constantly be adding tools to their tool bag and constantly be, trying to develop, we have to do the same thing. So I think we would be complete frauds if we weren't doing that. like John said, like the foundations are going to remain the same. The game is the game. Hockey is hockey. 15 to 20% is going to be tweaked year over year and adjusted for new trends, whether that be from a skill side of things or a tactical side of things and how people are coaching and thinking about the game. But I think the cool part here, maybe something I didn't foresee as it relates to integration, is how valuable it is to have not just the skill guys, but the tactical guys to kind of, talk to our RHA coaches and be able to get information on them on maybe more so on like the problem side of it, not the good. Hey, like what are players missing at this age? Like what is the most lagging factor, right? And that does kind of change over time, birth year to birth year, as hockey, as younger hockey players are maybe over, specializing a little too early. What's the current, like that issue looks a lot different for me. The problems I'm trying to solve with a 14 to 16-year-old player now is a lot different than the problems I was trying to solve 5 years ago. And then same thing, like getting that information through the lens of a scout. We have scouts on staff, having those people with, looking through different lenses, bringing all that information together. And ultimately it ends up pretty much on us to kind of make sure we boil that down to the best plan possible. The part of integration I didn't foresee that has an insane amount of value that even compared to some programs across Canada, I'm going to say it, like they don't have that. They don't have scouts that they can go have coffee with every morning. They don't have tactical coaches who are, playing up different power play models or PK models or seeing players at every stage in development to grab that information. So selfishly, as the off-ice guy, it makes my job like a lot easier. And as an off-ice guy working in hockey, you really have to begin. We have a saying upstairs: begin with the score. Work from the scoreboard backwards.
Yeah, and I think that integration piece is also a huge part of what pushes us every year. So if it's, there's different tactics in the game for sure, and game systems that are changing every year, and looking at it through the lens, like you said, of a development coach, you're going to find, this new breakout that comes out, or this new PP setup that comes out, new power play setup. You're going to find ways within that there's skills that players need in order to be successful within that. Yeah. We're going to touch on that so that then the player can see how they can implement that. So really that's probably the biggest, evolution year to year, is those new things and those new skill sets that players need to add. But they always still have that foundational piece, right, that they're with. So who knows where it's going to morph in the next year with that integration piece, but I feel like it's evolving all the time. Even throughout the summer, I can guarantee there'll be points that we evolve the program for what we have set up for it as an integration piece.
I think it's also important to mention there'll be points too where we were wrong. Yeah, we don't have all the answers, but we also have the ability to communicate day to day and make those pivots, which, can write the best plan in the world. I've written thousands of training programs. There's going to be bumps in the road. And if you aren't, it's really hard. If you're not in the same facility and you can't see that person and talk to your on-ice coach, or the on-ice coach can't talk to the off-ice coach, it is much more challenging to make those tiny little adjustments, which again, not sexy, but those are the things that make the real difference. Like, is it really the quality of my training program, or is it that level of attention to detail and the care factor that really sets it apart? Of course, you need your foundation, and you need, on the off-ice side, some of those scientific principles and methods that are proven to work over time, and we have measurables to support them. But the longer I do this, the more I realize that it is those little pieces of communication that really aggregate over time to some pretty awesome results. Yeah,
and it's that investment in the athlete that really separates the program. Yeah. So, I mean, I think for me, the R1 program, when you look at it, the things that highlight it the most for me are the growth of the program. The word spreading to us evolving to have a school program now, in both here and Kelowna, providing the same, level of service at that. I think, just being part of something that you know, sat with a coworker and a good buddy and created years ago, that's evolved to the point where people are talking about it, you know, and they're asking about what's R1, and there's so much interest in it. And I think from my standpoint, that's the success of it. We've had countless players go through the program. And for me, it's never been about, bragging about those successes that players have had. For me, the reward comes in the fact that when they have those successes, they come back and share them with us, or you get that text, or you see the first goal and you text them, and they come back and say, or send you a video of something they did that they've worked on for a number of years and struggled through to get. I think that's the biggest piece, and that happens at all levels of players. But I mean, the ultimates are the highlights of those things for me. The Stanley Cups, stuff like that, those are great to be a part of, but it's more the journey with the athlete, I think, is the best part. Not only Stanley Cup, but going out with guys that have now, they're starting careers, they've started families, and now going full circle and being part of that, I think, is, for me, what it's all about, because it started with an investment in an athlete that was an investment in their family. The successes that come along the way are all in different aspects, but I think that when you look at R1, that's what it is about, is that athlete that you still have that person coming back to your table years later, right, to share those moments with you. So when I look at R1, that's how I would define it for me.
Yeah, I think the standout for me is probably two things. I think, like John touched on, like process, right? So, one of the standout memories I always have every year, it's like my favorite day. It's a tough day for some kids, but it's a great day for others. But the WHL draft is going on when RHA is still in here. A lot of our RHA guys work with us during the summer months. And, we have the web page up on the computer in the gym, and guys are hitting workouts and celebrating with each other. And for me, that's, it's maybe not R1 off-season specific, but a lot of those guys have been with us, even at that U15 level, a couple summers and off-seasons in the gym. And just seeing that and seeing how excited everybody is. Obviously, I'm happy for that individual player. I'm probably happier for just the culture of like celebrating each other's successes and progress over time. That's number one for me. And that just kind of shows how the culture within Testify is just all about process. The outcomes will come, right? And then the second thing for me is just the repeated trust, which you mentioned without using the word trust, but repeated trust year over year, I think, is something that no improvement in speed, power, or strength will ever impact me as much as players just wholeheartedly trusting in our ability to manage their physical health, right? Like, it's not just about the speed and the power. It's about the ton of rehabilitation that goes on built into workouts. Like, nobody's coming home 100% healthy after a Western Hockey League season, right? Or a AAA U15 season. There's going to be tweaks. There's going to be issues. And like, it's not a small thing to trust somebody to just put that and completely outsource that into somebody else's hands. So yeah, I'd say just that process, celebrating, all the positive things that have happened, with the people that we service and Testify. And there's been no shortage of amazing things that the guys and girls have accomplished. And then on the other side of it, it's just like trust, so much trust. And so that makes me more proud than anything.
Mm-hmm. To me, it's the only option. I think that there are other programs out there, etc. But the full-time investment in developing a program for your athlete based on their needs, I don't know why anyone wouldn't give it a try. There are, and we're confident with it with a lot of the athletes we have, that they do have opportunities to train with other trainers, and we're confident telling them to give it a try because there are lots of good options out there. But oftentimes that athlete-centered on and off ice connection and the relationships we have and the confidence we have to tell athletes that, like, give it a try, see what you think. I think that shows athletes that we believe in what we do.
Yeah.
So I think that for any athlete, if they are considering other options, give us a try, because I think what we're providing here, the planning side of it, the processing side of it, the relationships, the investment, the understanding of what you need at that age based on experience and time put in, is really unmatched. And I think the other side of it too is having a facility of our own. We're able to look at a calendar and say, this is the ultimate program for that athlete. We're not looking and saying, can I get ice at this time? Okay, I can only get ice at that time, so therefore I'm going to provide that July to August 16th program because that's when I can get ice. We're looking at it and saying, what does the athlete need first, going back to our schedule and building it from there with our on ice and our off ice. So you're really building it again on that athlete-centered program as opposed to what's available for you to do and the gym time you can get or the off or the on ice time you can get. You've built something that's specific to that athlete. Timing of sessions, whether they're 90 minutes, 75, an hour, they're all tapered to build to that athlete-centered program. So,
yeah, on the off ice side for me, it's pretty simple. It's the concept of rising tides raise all ships. So if you want to compete at a level that, you're 15 years old and you want to be a dominant player in the Western League someday, well, come see, because they're going to be training an hour before you and you're going to see them finishing their workouts at probably the hardest point in their workout. You're going to see that. You're going to walk in, before your on ice time, and you're going to see them competing at a high level. You're going to see it. It's right in front of you. And if you're not in that type of environment where, your goals are literally right in front of you, and you're being shown exactly what you need to do from an effort standpoint, which is the most critical ingredient in this whole process. If you don't have that, it's going to be that much harder, right? Compared to if you're seeing it every single day, you may not maybe appreciate how valuable that is. But I know when we talk to our current guys now, and we have guys that were, Jarv was in the junior group and then he morphed into the pro group. I know I could speak for him right now. He would say how much of an impact it had, having Coley and having Howds and seeing how professional these guys were, right? And it's not just at the pro level. It's at the U15 level, seeing how how hard our WHL guys work in the gym, and seeing, simple things such as just sweat pouring off, energy, attention to detail, and just constantly being able to kind of measure yourself and check yourself, I think is such a cool part of this environment. And that's what I would say to anybody considering this is, man, it's right in front of you. Yeah. Like, it's clear as day. And every day if you're doing what you need to do to achieve your goal. And I just don't think any other program can offer that. Yeah. In an integrated on and off ice. You might see it on the ice, you might see it off the ice, but where are you going to see it? Both. Yeah. Guys grinding and engaging in that process. Yeah. And grinding doesn't mean killing yourself. It means attention to detail. It means preparing and all the habits and details that we talk about. So yeah. And I think just building on that, like what you're touching on is culture. I think culture is really, you want to be part of that culture. Yeah. So really that's what separates us. You want to be part of that culture. And the secondary part is we're going to take care of the habits and the details of the game. We're going to build you all the little things to get you ready for that. And the last part is just the trust. It's trusted by professionals. It's trusted by, 200 athletes. It's grown. It's not just that one age group that we're offering to. Yeah. It's the gambit that you can see it across the board. You can see the offering is straight across the boards. The habits and details we're establishing with the pros, we're building those down to those U13s for on and off it. It's just scaled. 100%. Yeah.
So, and then you're part of that culture. You become part of that. You get to see those guys in the gym, like you said. You get to see them off the ice. And it's hard to not trust that and want to be part of that.
Yeah, that's the coolest. And you know what? Like there's a girl on our female U18 prep team who worked out in the gym this summer as part of R1, and you know, Jarv knows her name.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is so cool to me, and it's like a story that we, you know, it's always a joke. It's kind of a running joke with her, but like that type of stuff is. Yeah, that culture piece is just, it just can't be matched.
Yep.
And I think the other thing I wanted to touch on too is just players wanting to be in that next group, right? So, you know, we have players in our U18 prep team that are going to be potentially eligible for our junior AM or Western League group. They are frothing at the mouth to be able to skate against the Lancers, the Liskies, compete against those guys, because that's who they're competing against next year, right? And just always having maybe that little bit of carrot sitting there, right? Hodds was a great example last summer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think being able to see that again and see that group and want to be in that group, there's like that motivation just can't be matched. That's such a critical ingredient.
And again, that's that trust factor in it too. You know, some of those names you mentioned is, you know, even as far back as, you know, with Jarv and Lambo, and you know, even as far back as Harmsy. Like, you think about some of the things that, you know, those guys trusted us with. You know, was it the right group?
They still do.
And they're still doing it.
Yeah.
So when you look at, you know, why choose the program, is there's a reason it's been going for as long as it have. And it hasn't wavered. We've stayed consistent with what we're doing. And that trust factor, you know, is
I think that's probably our answer then.
Yeah.
Why choose the program?
Yeah.
Trust.
Yeah.
And culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.